Just when you thought it was safe to go back to the tournament, here's a look at the NECA Toys Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Loot Crate exclusive Tournament Fighters Armaggon. Lootcrate and NECA have teamed up again for a brand new collection of limited edition TMNT collectibles, apparel, gear, and figures. This time around, coming from the fast-paced fighter Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Tournament Fighters, the street-fighting shark Armaggon is here to take a bite out of some turtle shell. Now, while Sheriff Brody is worrying about sharks on Amityville waters, we have to contend with the likes of Armaggon. Before we get a closer look, though, at the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Tournament Fighters Armaggon, let's grab the tape measure just to see how tall the figure stands. As it stands right now, Armaggon is only exclusive through Loot Crates. Though maybe down the road, NECA may plan to release this guy individually. Time will tell. Taking it right to the very top of his dorsal fin, you're looking at the shark standing about 7 inches in height, or the figure's about 17 centimeters tall. Technically, yes, we don't have any Tournament Fighter Turtle toys yet from NECA Toys other than Armaggon, but what we do have, at least for comparisons, is a Turtles in Time Leatherhead, who I thought would make a good size comparison. Even as big as Leatherhead was, he's only to about the shoulders of Armaggon. Armagon's quite a lot bigger of a toy. Leatherhead was also granted and gifted a second release. If you weren't so friendly and keen on the idea of getting a pixelated version of Leatherhead, there was also the cartoon version of Leatherhead, which had more animated color scheme. I don't also have a Turtles in Time turtle on the ready, but what I do have at least is one that shares the same mold. Here's what Armaggon looks like next to Michelangelo, and poor Mikey, being the smallest of the three, only goes unfortunately to the elbows of Armaggon. Granted, Armaggon is from a tournament fighter, but still was surprised to see that the figure didn't come included with any other accessories than 2 pairs of swappable hands. The first of which that we'll have a look at is a pair of mauling hands. I always just describe them as mauling hands. Don't they just look like they're good for squeezing big giant cantaloupes? Or maybe squeezing some turtle's head. I don't know, whatever comes first. The hands themselves, I think, have probably been used before. Likely, maybe either Rocksteady or Bebop. But as you can see in this case, they've actually been colored in gray. I'm going to swap these out in a moment. By the way, FYI, the figure currently has closed fists in the sockets of his forearms. We're going to do away with those in a moment. The other thing that kind of has me scratching my head is the next pair of hands that he comes included with. Tough time holding on to this one. He has one that actually looks like he should be really holding something. Perhaps this as well was a hand that was shared with one figure we already had a look at. You know, in fact, hold on one second. I do have, after all, just bringing back in Leatherhead. You know, looking at the 2 figures now, at least their hands, it looks like they are sharing the exact same hand to one another. I picked the perfect figure for comparisons. So yeah, while the hand is unfortunately one that gets shared with Leatherhead, unlike Leatherhead, though, he doesn't come included with any accessories. I mean, they probably could have come up with an accessory like a harpoon gun. Generally, when you have a water-bearing warrior like Armaggon, you'd want to give him something water-related. I think maybe a harpoon gun would be ideal if they had included it with the figure, other than just like, this is the other hand he comes included with as well. And really clearly, you can see that this is designed for holding something. And yet the figure comes included with no other accessories than the ones we just finished having a look at. If, though, you did want to change out the hands, pretty easy. You just want to avoid the fins on the sides of the forearms. Just wiggle this off, twist these off carefully. If you have the time on your hands, literally, just take the time to put the hands in. You don't want to be breaking these pegs. Go ahead and do that with the one hand. And then literally on the other hand, I really do have to come up with a t-shirt that says that, literally on the other hand. Nobody's going to get that reference other than perhaps you, the viewing audience. We're going to go ahead and twist that off, and we're going to replace it with what I feel to be more exciting looking hands. Cantaloupe squeezing, Michelangelo squeezing, whatever you want to do with those hands. He does have, at least, I think those are nicer looking hands in all honesty. But still, though, I feel that if you're going to take the time to include these hands that are clearly used, probably now from Leatherhead, seeing as we've already proved the proof is in the pudding with this one here, and likely the same with this one on the other side. Just want to quickly double check that Leatherhead, no, the other hand that I had in the forum was just a closed fist. I didn't think that one far enough in advance. But yeah, other than just getting an accessory for those hands to be holding something, I guess, if anything, at least he comes included with hands. Getting, though, a closer look at Armaggon, some assembly was required for the figure, taking him out of his plastic prison. I did end up having to install the tail. The tail was a separate piece, as you saw at the beginning. It was packed along with the fists. Simply just pop that onto the ball joint, and you're good to go. There's technically articulation, so you can move it up and down and back and forth. So if he's a happy shark, would you have a happy shark? I guess you would. Everything in nature has a happy and an unhappy side to it. I'm hoping right now I'm dealing with the happier side of Armaggon. But yeah, you can have the tail moving back and forth. Some nice coloring also added to the fins. He has 3 of them after all. It kind of actually looks like a motorboat propeller. Maybe that's how he propels himself in the water if he ever jumps in and takes a plunge. Anyways, though, getting a closer look at the face. One thing I really like is sharks. So if you can find a way to take a shark, take turtle toys, and combine the two together, I think you have yourself quite a happy looking marriage. And to be fair, really, it's a pretty nice looking shark. He does have beady little eyes. They're not beady in circles, they're actually beady in squares. Everything really about this figure is very pixelated. He does have squares for eyes instead of circles. And then he has, as you can see across his skin surface, all these pixelated squares, to mimic, of course, the way the character would have looked in the tournament fighters. Now, as good as this mold may be, just think if there's an opportunity down the road to reuse this mold, you got to believe that they would. I would love to see this guy get maybe a cartoon color scheme, even though I don't think Armaggon ever appeared in a Turtle episode. I would really love to see this guy get treated again to another re-release. One at least that would be retail release, and not one that would be dedicated to you subscribing to Lootcrate services. By the way, though, FYI, his mouth does open and close. So if you prefer his mouth a little bit closer together, showing off those pearly whites, you can do that. Unlike, though, a real shark, he doesn't have several rows of teeth. So once he does break off the ones that you're seeing right now, he's quite out of luck. He's not going to have any other set. He's going to have to wait to grow them more in. And then, of course, he does have little nostrils there. All the better to be smelling you. And what's rather interesting about Armaggon is the fact he does have these sort of side turbines, these little propellers on the sides of his head. It's a really interesting design, not one that you'd normally expect to see with sharks. Sharks don't tend to have that. They have to rely on their tails alone to move them through the waters. This would give him some extra speed, I'm guessing, when he's inside the water. And actually, these are cabled off. They're connected through the top, and they're running to the forearm, and they're also running to his belt. Now, that does limit a little bit of the articulation about the figure that we'll talk more about in a moment. But speaking, though, of the yellow does have several different tones to it. A slightly darker, more gold color yellow. Gets a more medium yellow, and then through that, sprinkled in there with squares, you got a more lighter yellow added in there as well. The coloring on this guy is really good. If you don't mind the pixelated look to some of these Turtle video game figures, I think Armaggon's a great pickup to have. Again, the one thing that's a little bit more limited on the figure is the articulation, but overall, I'm really happy with how this one did turn out. The joints are nice and tight on this guy as well. Because likely this is going to be the first and only time they're going to be reusing this mold, unless they probably may have used maybe the legs. Now that I'm looking at it, perhaps maybe the legs were used. Just going to bring back in my reference point here. Yeah, well, obviously, maybe the thigh. The thigh and the knee may be shared, and as well maybe the torso. Now that I'm looking at doing some more deducing, the torso perhaps was reused, the thigh was reused, and the knee was reused. Obviously, in this case, Armaggon has a slightly longer leg, and he also has much more of a muscular calf as well. He's got that one over Leatherhead. But yeah, I mean, overall, just a nice looking figure. He's got these big, giant flipper feet on the bottom. Does have pegals on the undersides, although the figure doesn't have any display stand accommodating him. You can, of course, use another NECA display stand. I still think they still sell them in stores. For the articulation on this guy, his head is going to be all of void. I mean, there's basically nothing you can do with head articulation. It's built to the body. The head, as well as the turbines, as you can see, is permanently attached to the rest of his torso. So the only bit of articulation that he has from basically here to the top of his dorsal, all the way down to his tummy tum-tum, is only just the ball joint that you're seeing right now. You can rotate it back and forth. You can hinge it up, hinge it down, but only just by a little bit, allotting for a lot of space. Here's where the issue comes when it comes to Armaggon, is his arms. The arms do move forward, yes. They do move back, in theory, yes. You can as well rotate the arm, which is better of the three. But hinging the arm out is really where I have the problem. When you start hinging the arm up, you'll see right away that the tubes start to fold in on themselves. And while it may not pose a problem right now, I do worry that the tube may start to break or start splitting right here. I think when it comes to displaying at least a case like Armaggon, I'm probably going to keep his arms relaxed like this and have at least a little bit of less stress to the pipe and the tubing as possible. Again, like he said, like I said, he does have the bicep swivel. The figure does have a double hinge, I should say, on the elbow. Now, this arm is really tight on this figure. He does have still the double hinge on the elbow. I may even want to go in there and heat that up a little bit with a hairdryer, but even still, the figure does have double hinges on his elbows. There's one there, and there's one there. Hands as well, depending on whatever hand you decide to display him with, does rotate all the way around. You can hinge it also back and forth just a little bit. And when it comes to his legs are on very generous ball joints. Again, nice tight joints in all the things on this figure. Legs move forward and back. There's also a mild swivel at the top, more the way it was assembled in the factory. A double hinge on the knee, although you're really only going to be accomplishing one of the joints. Because the calf is so thick and his thigh is so thick, meeting in the middle, there doesn't really allot for an extra joint to work. I mean, you can bend it just a little bit more than that, but I mean, for stability of the figure, why would you be bending the knees anyways? He does have, again, ankle pivots. You can hinge the feet up and down, and technically you can rotate the feet all the way around. Just the joint is really tight on this figure. Overall, it's a nice looking figure. I like the way that Armaggon looked. It's a shame, though. It's a shame that the lure, the reel to bring you in, so to speak, was all based on the idea of actually having to subscribe to the Lootcrate service, which is fine. It was an offer available, and it allowed collectors to get a chance to get limited edition figures that wouldn't be found anywhere else. But unfortunately, having to wait as long as they did, I did do an unboxing of that recent Lootcrate box, and it took forever for some of these figures to start showing up. And because of that as well, the rarity of these figures have even skyrocketed more. I think Armaggon, in fact, showing up online already. The sets, just for the Lootcrate alone, with all the contents inside, go to well into $300. I've seen some for $250, some for $300. And you would imagine as well, because of the rarity of some of these figures, the price point on what they would be going for would be rather high as well. If you're lucky enough to find one, congratulations. It's a great looking figure, like I said, but trying to track one down may be quite hard to do. Again, we can only hope, as good as this figure did turn out, that we may get a retail release of this guy down the road by NECA Toys. I'd like to say it was worth the wait to finally now have Armaggon in hand. And then, while I'm not diminishing how cool this figure actually did end up looking like in hand, I do think that the wait was a little too long when it comes to many of these Lootcrate boxes. As you may speak with other people that were unfortunately subscribed to the service, we had to wait a whole long time before finally boxes started to show up. There was a big gap of time. We all can relate to that, where boxes didn't seem to be moving at all from their warehouse. Now, slowly trickling through the watery stream, we're finally now starting to see some of those boxes showing up. And resulting of that, some of people lucky enough may have already gotten their hands of Armaggon. Some other people that had subscribed to the service may have to wait just a little bit longer. But mine did finally show up. And again, I like the look of Armaggon. He does use a lot of the same parts now that I look at it with other turtle figures we've gotten before. Speaking, though, of Rocksteady, Bebop, and the one that I used for the example, the Turtles in Time Leatherhead, shares a lot of the same mold elements as Armaggon. Which, of course, would make sense. If they are going to be releasing a limited edition figure, they're not going to want to tool a mold from scratch. They're going to get a little bit more mileage out of their mold as they possibly can. So Armaggon does reuse, like the calves, or it does reuse at least the knees, the thighs. Looks like maybe the lower torso, possibly even the upper torso has been used at some point by another figure. Maybe even the top torso is also by Leatherhead. Keep in mind, Leatherhead also had that vest over top of his body, concealing and covering a lot of what we would have been able to see had the vest not been there. The figure does have some swappable hands, not really much of anything else to really speak of. I do wish he could have come included with some weapon of some sorts, like a harpoon gun, or like some water blasting gun. I don't know. What would you pack along with a shark? Some would say his weapon is his mouth. So based on that, he wouldn't really necessarily need any other accessory. But yeah, just to throw in a harpoon gun, just to say we threw in a weapon, would have been a nice touch as well. Have you had the chance to get yourself Armaggon? No. Have you had the chance at least to get the subscription service from Lootcrate? There is still the opportunity to get Armaggon, I guess, online on his own. But of course, to pay the prices of what eBay sellers are selling this guy for right now. Hopefully, you were smart enough to subscribe to Lootcrate right in the beginning. And then, of course, just through the delaying process of waiting it out. Finally, these boxes are now starting to show up. What do you guys think, though, of Armaggon down below? Let me know down below what you guys think of the figure. And as well, if you enjoyed this video, hit with a like. If you're loving the content you're seeing and do want to certainly stick around for more shell action, that's turtles after all, make sure, of course, you hit the subscribe button down below and turn on the bell notification, because while we have wrapped up things right now for a pretty cool looking shark, there will be more turtle reviews coming your way. As always, thanks for watching. See you guys next time.